Hi, so if you're from my Warframe stuff, don't watch this video. We're going to be talking about old school RuneScape today. I don't really care if my channel does that well. So one of the great things about that is that I can kind of just talk about whatever I want. And with Gridmaster coming up, which is basically it's a 1 month league for RuneScape, one of the things that really has been being talked about quite a bit is this task right here, defeat the lesser demon in Wizard's Tower. So by doing this, you'll get the reward minimum potential, and minimum potential basically just increases your minimum hit by 5. It doesn't really affect accuracy at all. It's just +5 to everything. So let's talk about how good this is. If you're wondering why I personally am qualified to talk about this, one, I was Dragon Cup last year, so I basically finished the league last year. I got Infernal Pet, you know, I had a quiver, I maxed, I basically did everything in the entire league. But beyond that, I've actually gone and I've implemented minimum potential into the DPS calculator. So you can see that if I click this, you can see how the hit distribution changes. This is with the Twin Flame stuff, but yeah, that's the real reason that I'm qualified. Dragon Cup doesn't really mean that much. It just means that I play the game too much. Being able to implement the math is probably more important because now I can actually give you numbers for like how useful this thing is. So let's do that. The first case I'm going to be showing off is Bronze Knives at 40 range. So this is kind of what I would consider to be like the first relevant case. I don't have a range potion here because I kind of assume that at this point you wouldn't be really using range potions. Maybe you would be using a prayer if you were fighting something especially dangerous. Maybe we go up to this at some point. But for now, we'll just assume lower on the spectrum. So we'll just say Hawkeye. I don't have anything on this particular loadout, but you can see that between each of these loadouts, they're all the same except for what masteries they have checked. So this one just has minimum potential. This one has just the League's 5 mastery 5. And then this one has both of them. So here is our actual DPS differences here. So you can actually see that we have a 2.32 divided by 1.723. So this is about an 87.5% increase in damage per second. It's good. In this case, you're basically doing, you know, between 70 and 90% more damage, depending on what target you're fighting, depending on how much defense they have, and depending on your range level quite a bit, right? The higher your range level is, the closer together these are going to get because your distribution changes from just 5s. In this case, like you can see, we can only hit 5s with just min 5 at 40 range. But like, let's say we get steel knives instead, right? Steel knives, because their max hit is generally higher because they have a higher range strength, this then ends up being less impactful. So that is kind of the main trend that you'll see across all of these numbers, is that the higher our strength is and the higher our total damage is, the less likely we are to like actually have minimum 5 like significantly impact us. One of the other cases I want to show off for this is Jad. So here is our DPS differences here. So this is just min 5 by itself. So you can see that we have about an 86% damage increase here. This is kind of what we would expect across the board. But one interesting thing that you'll notice here is that our min 5 to no min 5 actually goes up quite a bit more when we have this League's 5 mastery. And the reason for that is because this is basically having our attack speed, but it's also giving us an accuracy buff. You can see that like on this, we actually get that 100% accuracy. And then if you don't remember what this does, this basically, it takes 2 tick weapons down to, or sorry, it takes 5 tick weapons down to 2 ticks. And then it takes 2 tick weapons like these knives down to 1 tick. So it basically doubles our attack speed. So it turns out when you attack twice as fast, it's really good to hit minimum of 5 damage or even a maximum of 5 damage, right? Because this can't even normally hit 5s, I think. Oh, no, we barely hit 5s with just the mastery 5. So it basically takes all of these possible hits and turns them into 5s, and that's really good for the distribution in general. I really like it when these two things are together, I think. So yeah, that would be one thing that I would look at in general, is that if you're getting the attack speed mastery, I would highly recommend making sure that you get the demon mastery also at some point, especially like early, like middle of like the early game. You know, if you've already killed Bryo Fighter, you should probably go get your demon kill at that point, assuming that Bryo is actually where we get the attack speed buff. Speaking of which, I do actually expect this accuracy buff to be part of the league again. I think it was in there for the last 2 leagues, so I don't really expect Gridmaster to be any different. So this is kind of, this would be something I would expect, I think. Okay, let's talk about our second case. This is one of the more interesting ones. This is the Blood Moon set. If you're not aware of what the Blood Moon set does, it's basically, it hits twice, so it has 2 hit spots. So there's 2 different attacks that are getting raised potentially up to 5. And then it also does accuracy rolls a little weird. So the second hit can only hit if the first hit also hits, I guess. And so because of that, the distribution ends up being a little weird looking. So you can see that we actually have a 12% chance to hit 10 damage and like a small chance to hit 5 damage, because sometimes the first one will hit, but the second one won't. So it's a little, it looks a little scuffed compared to, you know, our nice flat graph for normal stuff. In case you're wondering why that's the case, it's because of that minimum 5 mastery, right? And then you can actually see here's our bonkers with the attack speed mastery. So this gets lowered to 1 tick sometimes, because if you're wearing the full Blood Moon set, there's a chance to have your attacks lowered by 1 tick. So Blood Moon tends to be very, very good with the League's 5 mastery. So that's why this is such a high number. It also rolls max hits twice. So we're getting kind of less use out of the mastery than out of the min 5 mastery than you'd kind of expect. But because we have base 70s here, you can kind of see where this is going. I am super combated here, and I have piety active. So the numbers are a little bit higher than you'd kind of expect them to be for a normal base 70 person, but yes, that's the case. And you can actually see that this DPS increase has gone down by a lot compared to the last version, right? And this is entirely because our distribution is just higher than it was for the earlier case with bronze knives, right? So this is a fast attack speed weapon. We are hitting twice, but you can see that once you start hitting in the 20s or so, this becomes less relevant, I guess. So something to worth noting is that once you get out of like the 40, the 20 to 40 range of combat stuff, min 5 becomes less and less relevant as time goes on, even for weapons like this that like have 2 hit splats. Okay, here's our next case. This is just ancients. So what I have this as is, I believe it's 70 mage. Yeah, so we're at 70 mage here. We don't have any combat boosts, but we do have Mystic Might on. And then I do have Ice Burst, which is right at 70 magic. So this would be kind of when you're expecting to start bursting and stuff. I did include Mage's Book here, but I don't necessarily think that you would have this. I just am using it as a placeholder for whatever magic % bonus we might get during the league. So keep that in mind, I suppose. And what you'll actually see here is that our DPS increase has basically plummeted at this point. What we're looking at here is, because our max hit is now 22, the amount of times when this 1 to 5 range is relevant has gone down drastically, right? So we have 25% of the time we're doing 5 damage, and then 75% of the time the mastery effectively does nothing because we're already hitting above that 5. And so that's why this DPS increase is basically so small, right? And you can actually see that we're only getting like about a 5.5 increase in damage at this point. What is worth noting here, actually, let me make sure that I have this set correctly. I don't. There we go, fixed it. And this kind of, it stays the same even into the mid 5, mastery 5 versus mastery 5 range. So same idea, just gonna divide that 11.8 by this 11.37. And you can see that we have about a 4% DPS increase. And a big part of that in this case is because previously the magic mastery had these upper values that it could hit on occasion. So it's less relevant, I suppose. Okay, and then the final case that I'm going to be showing off here is Torva. So Torva is, this is basically just back melee with a scythe. I am potted here, and I am using piety. There's a good chance that we'll be able to pot up to like 255, but I'm not betting on it. So right now we're just going to stick with super combat and piety. So interesting thing about the scythe. Because it has 3 hit splats, the distribution ends up being really weird looking. So you can actually see that we have a pretty good chance to hit 30 damage exactly, a very good chance to hit 10 damage exactly, and then a kind of relevant chance to hit 5 damage. And you can see that this 6 to whatever range is kind of small. A very weird distribution graph. But what I really want you to look at is this. So by the time that you have a scythe in your max and everything, min 5 is functionally irrelevant. This is a 2% DPS increase, which the number of times that has mattered is probably higher than you'd expect. But in this case, we're doing so much damage that I wouldn't really consider it. And you can actually see that even with the rank 5 melee master here, which gives us a chance to like echo damage and stuff, this still isn't really that relevant anymore. Like if somebody asked me to compare 34 to 33.8 damage per second in Runescape, I wouldn't be able to tell you the difference, right? And the numbers support that. It's about a 1.5% DPS increase. So semi-relevant on Bloodvelds, I guess. But you can see that, like, I don't know. What should we even check? Let's try like Bandos, I guess. Let's try Grador. How's that sound? So in the case of Grador, again, it's the same idea, right? We have a 3% DPS increase. So not a huge deal is probably a good way to put it. Yeah, so a 3 to 4% DPS increase, depending on if you have that Mastery 5. And if we are not strong enough to have that 2-tick attack speed by having a full Torva and a Scythe, then I don't know what's going on. So these two numbers are probably the more relevant if I had to say anything. But yeah, I think that was mostly all I really wanted to go over. If you want a good TLDR for this, here are the main points that I would go over. It's between a 70 and 90% DPS increase depending on what you're fighting in the early game. So around like level 20 to level 50, somewhere in that area, especially if you're using bronze knives or another fast attacking weapon. The second thing to note is that if you have minimum 5 in the early game, getting the attack speed mastery becomes very important for the early levels. Having them both together will increase your DPS by a lot. They kind of multiply together. In the early game, I would say it's very, very relevant. For the mid game or for special weapons like Blood Moon, where it would impact it more, it's semi-relevant, but I wouldn't stake my life on, on a 10% DPS increase. So even by level 70, it's about a 10% DPS increase. So don't really think about it too hard when you're in the mid game. If you couldn't get it earlier and you're to this point, it's not worth going out of your way to get it. And then that's especially true when you are dealing with magic stuff. So if you're hitting a single target, or if you're only doing one hit splat for a high amount of damage, then don't worry about it at all. At this point, it's not relevant at all. And then by the time that you're maxed, just don't think about it. At this point, it is functionally irrelevant. Okay, I think that's really all I wanted to go over for this. If people have any questions or they want me to calc anything else specific, please let me know. I'm going to be leaving a link to a Discord thread in the League's Discord where I'll be doing more of these calcs if people are curious about them. And then I'll try to update my branch of the calculator as time goes on. If you do want the source code for this, the GitHub link will be in the description also, so feel free to go play with that if you need to. For Warframe people, sorry that this isn't a Warframe video. I do plan on doing a Million Kuva video when the arcane changes come out for Archguns. So I'll probably, we'll be doing some gambling around then. And if you're not a Warframe person, that's okay. Thank you for watching anyways. And I will talk to you guys next time.